promoting economic and environmental security amid the current crisis. I want to extend my warmest appreciation to the Polish Parliament for hosting this session. I also wish to thank our International Secretariat for its diligent support. It has been 9 months since the beginning of the unprovoked and unjustified aggression of Ukraine by the Russian Federation. I would like to immediately express my full solidarity with the people of Ukraine and to strongly condemn the Russian military aggression, which is in breach of everything we believe in and work for in this Assembly. Besides its dramatic military, political, and humanitarian implications, this war directly and severely undermines economic and environmental security across the region. But its negative impact must be seen in the wider context of economic recovery post-COVID-19 pandemic, which was already a serious challenge on its own, and though the lens of the current climate crisis, which remains a top security concern at all levels. We have understood by now that there can be no global security without a more sustainable development and greater attention to our health, climate, and planet as a whole. This session will therefore focus on better understanding these interlinked threats, while also considering ways to promote economic and environmental security amid the current circumstances, including through the work of our parliamentarians and parliaments, of course. Dear colleagues, the environmental damage caused by armed conflicts is massive. The Ukrainian government currently estimates the environmental damage to be $36 billion, but this number will keep growing. Military emissions of CO2 are skyrocketing, reaching hundreds of millions of tons, jeopardizing the Ukrainian efforts to reach the goals of the Paris Agreement. The war in Ukraine is threatening the unique Ukrainian biodiversity that represents around 35% of total European biodiversity. 30% of the country's protected areas have experienced bombing on fire destruction, decimating 3 million hectares of forest, destroying precious sources of CO2 absorption. This is posing serious transboundary health hazards to citizens due to the high level of pollution of land, air, and water stemming from military activities and operations. Indeed, the targeting of water facilities in Ukraine by the Russian forces have led to an estimated 1.4 million Ukrainians without access to safe water, and a further 4.6 million people with only limited access to water. The limited water resources are heavily polluted by chemicals leached into rivers and groundwater, which facilitates the spread of diseases among the most vulnerable. It will take years to depollute water bases in Ukraine. The precise environmental impact of the war is difficult to measure due to damages to monitoring systems and a lack of checks on pollution emissions of military actions. This is where the OSCE and the international community in general can play a role in helping assess the environmental damage of the war to better inform our future reconstruction efforts. The Russian invasion has also deepened the energy crisis, driving oil and gas prices to their highest levels in years, leading to economic distress, social instability, and record inflation across the region. The so-called weaponization of energy has led most European governments to urgently reconsider and diversify their energy supplies to survive the winter and ensure greater resilience against future similar shocks. Furthermore, the war has demonstrated how weak and exposed our critical infrastructure is. Besides the systematic attacks on Ukrainian infrastructures, which left millions of citizens without heating, electricity, and water at the brink of winter, the irresponsible sabotage of Nord Stream 1 and 2 and the repeated attacks on Ukrainian nuclear power plants bear consequences that stretch far beyond Ukraine. Needless to point out that any nuclear accident would have disastrous environmental, economic, and health consequences for decades. In this regard, I call for the immediate creation of safe zones around all nuclear power plants, and I welcome the direct involvement of the IAEA in this context. As a matter of fact, we were hoping to have Executive Director Grossi here with us today, but unfortunately he could not make it. The war is also severely hampering connectivity in the OSCE region, while the most clear example is represented by the emerging food crisis, which, according to the United Nations, will impact 1.7 billion of people across the globe. Different tiers of economic sanctions are also straining economic relations among our participating states, thus bringing additional hardship to our economies and consequently on all our citizens. And all this is happening while we are trying to rebound after 3 years of pandemic, which had devastating socioeconomic consequences on our societies. Against this very complex backdrop, the need to work together in order to promote economic and environmental security is greater than ever. An example of doing so would be using the unprecedented energy crisis that we are experiencing as a turning point to boost the use of cleaner, more diversified, and therefore resilient energy solutions with longer-term benefits for all of us. Equally, there are important economic and fiscal measures that can be adopted to support our economies and citizens at this critical juncture. I therefore encourage all honourable members to share their views and lessons learned on how to promote economic and environmental security under these challenging circumstances, including through the work of the OSCE and of our national parliaments. Dear colleagues, I'm now pleased to introduce our panel of guest speakers whose precious insights will inform our subsequent debate. Our first speaker today is Ambassador Ingli Hassani, the coordinator of OSCE economic and environmental activities. As you probably remember, his office is mandated to support OSCE participating states in implementing commitments in the economic and environmental dimension. Ambassador Hassani, a true friend indeed of our Assembly, has 17 years of experience at the Albanian Ministry of Defense in various roles. Ambassador Hassani also served as chairperson of the OSCE Permanent Council during Albania's chairmanship in 2020. Dear Ambassador, dear Ingli, thank you for accepting our invitation. I am eager to hear your perspective on these important matters and, of course, learn more about what the OSCE is doing at this critical juncture. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Dear Irene, dear co-panelists, honorable members of the Parliamentary Assembly, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, for me it's a distinct pleasure and an honor to be with the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly, and thank you very much for your kind invitation to address your fall meeting on such an important and pertinent matter. I'm grateful for the opportunity to bring the Office of the Coordinator on Economic and Environmental Activities perspective on how to best respond to the economic and environmental impact of the war against Ukraine. Obviously, the ongoing military conflict poses the most pressing security challenge that the Euro-Atlantic and the Euro-Asian space has faced since the end of the Cold War. And its ramifications are widespread and go far beyond the political realm. The environmental and economic impact of the war, for example, is particularly serious, not least because of the global impact on food and energy security. There are 4 key areas relevant to the work of the OSCE in the second dimension that I would like to touch upon today. First, inflation and soaring commodity prices. The war has led to skyrocketing prices of goods necessary for everyday life for people around the world, be it agricultural products such as grain to feed families, energy to heat homes, or basic materials to keep industries running. This is a matter of great concern, with severe repercussions on food security and very large economic and humanitarian effects on the poorest households. Given that poor families spend a larger share of income on food and energy, they are particularly vulnerable to the current price spikes. Second, the environmental risks. Ukraine withstands the worst of the armed conflict, particularly in terms of land degradation, soil contamination, the release of polluting substances into the environment, or damage to civilian infrastructure. However, no one should underestimate the regional dimension of environmental hazards caused by the ongoing war. Ukraine's immediate neighbors are equally exposed to air and water pollution, as well as hazardous waste contamination. Forest fires near nuclear reactors, for example, have in the past led to increased radiation levels, and radioactive pollution does not stop at the border. Such risks constitute one more reason why hostilities must be brought to a halt to limit the long-term environmental and human health impacts on Ukraine itself, on its people, but also on its neighbors. Third, the issue of energy security is back to the forefront of the international agenda, and this is particularly evident in Europe. Its proximity to the conflict and reliance on natural gas is negatively affecting energy supplies and increasing the risk of economic recession. Already last year, energy demand quickly returned to pre-pandemic levels as global economies emerged from lockdowns. Such a surge, perhaps the largest in history, has helped to propel the energy system into its most turbulent period since the last oil crisis almost 50 years ago. And the war against Ukraine has added to the existing market turmoil, fueling price hikes and threatening power shortages for many European countries. And fourth, the ongoing green transition process that global climate action are in jeopardy. Concerns over energy security are driving coal imports as nations race to secure fossil fuel supplies. Greenhouse gas emissions are also increasing. And while the post-pandemic recovery has played a significant role here, the war threatens to trigger a sharp slowdown of the transition to clean energy. And let me offer a few illustrative examples. Ukraine is one of the most important suppliers of energy transition metals such as copper, lithium, palladium, and neon. These metals are necessary for manufacturing solar panels, wind turbines, and other green technologies that control car emissions, to make a pertinent example. Supply disruptions of these materials are making it increasingly difficult to sustain the ongoing green transition process, at least in the short-term period. Excellencies, since the start of the war, the Office of the Coordinator for Economic and Environmental Activities in the OSCE has been carefully monitoring and reviewing available sources to collect relevant information on economic and environmental threats resulting from the military hostilities. In this endeavor, we build upon a large network of local interlocutors and the expertise gathered over the past years. And this provides a strong basis to respond to and mitigate these risks in the current situation and future post-conflict scenarios. While continuing to implement existing initiatives, we have designed new ones that meet emerging needs and shifting priorities under the guidance of the OSCE Secretary General's whole of the OSCE approach. My office has shown flexibility and ability to adapt to the new reality. We are committed to make full use of the existing toolbox to address the economic and environmental consequences of the ongoing war. And in this context, the office has developed a set of new projects and is adapting existing ones to the needs of Ukraine. We have already started implementing a new project aimed at assessing the environmental impacts of the war against Ukraine and options for remediation. This project is intended to help communities and the Ukrainian government to address and reduce environmental safety and security risks. The new project, Innovative Policy Solutions to Mitigate Money Laundering Risks of Virtual Assets, has already been launched. The second training under this project took place last week and targeted specifically participants from Ukraine. Within the cross-regional project promoting good governance and a positive business climate in the OSCE region through digitalization and the use of open data, over the past 6 months we supported the Ministry of Digital Transformation of Ukraine with developing trainings on open data, digital tools, and the establishment of e-service platforms. My office plans to work with public and private sector stakeholders to facilitate trade and exports of Ukraine grain as a contribution to global food security. But we are also in the process of designing a new initiative to create alternative logistic routes and deblock trade congestion in Ukraine using digital platform solutions, enhancing physical transport capacity and making smart use of containers for grain transports. Honorable members of the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly, as you might be aware, the war has severely affected the energy security of Ukraine and then of its neighbors, and in particular of Moldova. The destruction of critical energy infrastructure in Ukraine is leading to massive power outages and widespread blackouts. No access to stable electricity supply and heating will result in tremendous human hardship and suffering of the population, with mounting economic and human costs. While the Ukrainian energy providers are trying to operate under conditions of war, first ideas are emerging on how to build back better the energy sector in the country in a more resilient and sustainable way in the post-conflict scenario. And this means increasing the resilience of Ukraine's critical energy infrastructure from natural and man-made disasters, and in particular from climate change risks, but also switching renewable sources of energy such as wind, solar, and geothermal. My office stands ready to support Ukraine in this undertaking in order to manage an energy transition that is robust, socially just, and gender sensitive. Concretely, our newly developed project on mitigating climate change risks to critical energy infrastructure will include Ukraine as a pilot country. And in addition, we are ready to support the development of renewable energy in the country, the advancement of women in the energy transition, and the protection of critical energy infrastructure from natural and man-made disasters. Dear colleagues, I would like to conclude by pointing to a few important lessons that we can draw from the current crisis. Along with COVID-19, the war has highlighted the need for countries to strengthen their capacities to build clean technologies. It is also a wake-up call for our governments and our people to reduce reliance on fossil fuels by investing in renewables and better managing domestic energy demand. And for this, I'm pretty sure that not only this fora, but also other similar discussions in the OSCE and other international organizations will help. But with this, allow me once again to thank you so much, and dear Rini, thank you for this opportunity. The floor is back to you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Hassani. It was a very detailed presentation. I'm really impressed to hear how quickly the OSCE managed to adapt to the new circumstances and actively promotes economic and environmental security in and around Ukraine as well. As I was told, you might need to leave a bit earlier because you have to catch a flight. And thanks again for joining us in person despite a super busy agenda. Ingley, I do appreciate that. Thank you. Our next speaker is Dr. Joanna Padera. She is the president of the think tank Forum Energy based in Warsaw. In addition to her academic career, Dr. Joanna Padera has gained extensive experience in the fields of European energy and climate regulations in several institutions, including the Polish Ministry of the Environment and the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, UNFCCC. Dr. Joanna Padera, I am honored to have you with us today, and I look forward to hearing your insights on the current challenges regarding environmental and energy security in the OSCE region. The floor is yours, please.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon, everybody. I feel honored to be here, frankly speaking. So I would like to make several points, as I should be very concise. So number one is the situation in Ukraine, which is in current days really very dramatic. Ukraine is facing huge attacks on energy infrastructure, which is, of course, a big threat to security of supply, heating. So the priority for us should be to help Ukraine to restore its energy infrastructure first, and keeping lights on over winter, which, of course, will be challenged because of Russia focus on destroying the infrastructure. So it should be really very important, apart from, of course, stopping imperialistic implications of Russia and stopping the war, which is acceptable for European Union. On the other hand, we are in Europe driving the same boat. So we face a huge energy deficit, and that's the fact that we are in the middle of divorce with fossil fuels. And this was probably for Russia the very last moment to really use our dependence on fossil fuels and on Russia to really hit us. And we should really draw the lessons from this and make this divorce to an end. And this is it should be really a priority. So, of course, in the next months, keeping the lights on, also security of supply in Europe and solidarity among member states in sharing gas, coal, oil resources, and also electricity is the key, because we don't only have war, but we have several challenges in the context of security of supply, also nuclear power plants in France. So the next month is certainly will be the key for our let's say, security of supply and cooperation, but no doubt that for future climate neutrality goal is still a major challenge and should be kept, and particularly in the context that we are not having too much fossil fuels in Europe, only scaling up energy transition and developing renewables, also as a measure to strengthen our energy security, should be the priority. We made the right decision to phase out completely Russian fossil fuels. But of course, it will have an impact on us. We must take into account that it's not only supply threat for us for the next years to come, but also high prices. So we should do everything what we can in order to keep the prices lower. And the measure number one should be really reduce the demand and encourage societies to save energy in all possible ways. Otherwise, the prices, it not may be the case that the prices, that we will really face a blackout, but it is very likely that the very high cost, our societies will not be able to take up the cost of high energy. And this will be a challenge, because we now, in Poland, but in many countries, we create huge subsidies which we never seen in the past. We never spent so much money on renewables, on grids, on energy efficiency, compared to what we are envisaging to do in the next 6 months. And it's only the consumption. And by the way, it's also fossil fuel suppliers who will benefit most, and it will keep prices be still high. So we need to, in order to really end this, we need to reduce the demand, and that's really the key. And scaling up what we know, what can be done quickly, we can build renewables within few years. Reviewing the permitting, also helping Ukraine probably in supplying electricity, which for such countries as Poland also would be relevant. And last but not least, I think we should really change the definition of energy security. In the past, energy security definition was perceived as diversification of fossil fuel supply. It's not relevant anymore. Of course, we cannot make us now dependent on other countries once we are actually breaching this dependence on Russia. But the new definition of energy security should be really perceived as local energy, wind and solar. We don't pay for wind resources and solar resources, so this fuel is for free. And this is why it will be extremely the key to scale it up in future, but also, as I said, safe energy. And for us, it should be really something like the key in the next months to come, and also drawing long-term view for business to engage different stakeholders and do everything what we can to help Ukraine to keep the lights on and to come back to the previous status which Ukraine had as soon as possible. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Doana Bandera, for sharing your finding with us and for being here with us today. Our final speaker today is Mr. Kazimierz Klejna. Did I say it correctly?
Yes.
Member of the Senate of the Republic of Poland since 2011 and member of the Polish delegation to the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly. Dear Mr. Klejna, thanks again for joining this session. I am eager to hear your views on the role that parliamentarians can play on the economic and environmental aspect of the war in Ukraine, as well as learn more about what the Polish Parliament has been doing to overcome the current crisis. Please, the floor is yours.
Szanowna Pani Przewodnicząca, Szanowni Państwo, koleżanki i koledzy. Dokonując inwazji na Ukrainę, Rosja zniszczyła istniejącą architekturę bezpieczeństwa w Europie, bezwzględnie depcząc zobowiązania wypływające z aktu końcowego KBWE, z Helsinek oraz paryskiej Karty Nowej Europy z 1990 roku, która miała kończyć okres konfrontacji i być początkiem ery demokracji i pokoju w Europie. Jest też odpowiedzialna za niezliczone ofiary śmiertelne i ogrom cierpień ukraińskich obywatelek i obywateli. Wiemy, że w konflikcie straciło życie ponad 6 tysięcy cywilów, w tym ponad 400 dzieci, a ponad 10 tysięcy zostało rannych. Poza wymiarem ludzkim trwająca wojna ma również katastrofalny wpływ na gospodarkę Ukrainy. Wiele przedsiębiorstw działających w strefie działań wojennych przestało funkcjonować lub przeniosło się do innych części kraju, co doprowadziło do skokowego wzrostu bezrobocia sięgającego obecnie 30%. Rosyjskie ataki na cele energetyczne doprowadziły do zniszczenia 40% ukraińskiej infrastruktury strategicznej na kwotę ponad 115 miliardów dolarów, a przerwy w dostawach prądu zmusiły wiele przedsiębiorstw do zawieszenia lub zaprzestania działalności. Wreszcie morska blokada eksportu ukraińskich produktów rolnych, którą udało się częściowo ograniczyć poprzez transport ukraińskiego zboża przez Polskę, doprowadziło do pogorszenia się bilansu handlowego. W konsekwencji PKB Ukrainy w tym roku spadnie według szacunków Banku Światowego o 35%, a inflacja może osiągnąć poziom 25%. Ponadto 10% obniżki pensji i wysokie bezrobocie coraz mocniej dotykają ukraińskie społeczeństwo, które pauperyzuje się w szybkim tempie. Wystarczy powiedzieć, że odsetek osób borykających się z biedą wzrośnie w tym roku z 2 do 21%. Chociaż troska o ludzkie życie pozostaje najważniejsza, to trudno pominąć konsekwencje wojny dla środowiska. Opinią publiczną najbardziej zajmuje bezpieczeństwo elektrowni atomowych w Ukrainie, które jak Czarnobyl znajdowały się w obszarze działań wojennych, lub jak Zaporoże, największa elektrownia atomowa w Europie, jest wciąż okupowana przez rosyjskie wojska. Ten niepokój jest uzasadniony, biorąc pod uwagę ostrzał artyleryjskiej Zaporowskiej Elektrowni Jądrowej, znajdującej się na linii frontu, oraz eksplozje, które odcięły zasilanie jednego z jej reaktorów. Co więcej, wobec twierdzeń rosyjskiej propagandy o rzekomym przygotowaniu przez Ukrainę w tym obiekcie, w elektrowni, tak zwanej brudnej bomby, trzeba brać pod uwagę nawet najgorsze scenariusze. Działania rosyjskiego agresora prowadzą do katastrofy ekologicznej nie tylko w Ukrainie. Gleba i powietrze są zanieczyszczone niebezpiecznymi substancjami pochodzącymi z pożarów lasów, obiektów przemysłowych i infrastruktury krytycznej, jak również wybuchów amunicji i pocisków. Należy również zwrócić uwagę na niszczenie ekosystemów Morza Azowskiego, Morza Czarnego oraz Dniepru. Są one zanieczyszczane paliwem rakietowym zawierającym rakotwórcze toksyny, jak również ściekami, które po zniszczeniu przez Rosjan oczyszczalni ścieków dostają się w sposób niekontrolowany do akwenów wodnych. Koszt tych zniszczeń jest znaczny, zarówno w wymiarze finansowym, jak i przyrodniczym. Jak powiedział ukraiński minister ochrony środowiska w Parlamencie Europejskim, straty środowiskowe Ukrainy na początku października wyniosły już 36 miliardów euro. Spowodowana rosyjską agresją degradacja środowiska naturalnego na Ukrainie może mieć znaczące długoterminowe skutki. Los Ukrainy po zakończeniu konfliktu będzie zależał bowiem od przetrwania nie tylko infrastruktury stworzonej przez człowieka, ale również jej zasobów naturalnych. Szanowni Państwo, jak więc możemy i można pomóc Ukrainie? Przede wszystkim należy się skupić na krótkoterminowej pomocy finansowej, bez której Ukraina nie przetrwa gospodarczo. Obecnie Ukraina potrzebuje $3 miliardów miesięcznie, aby uniknąć upadku ekonomicznego. Poza tym społeczność międzynarodowa powinna wspierać ukraińską gospodarkę, co robi już Europejski Bank Odbudowy i Rozwoju, gdyż przełoży się to na dochody dla ukraińskich budżetów i zatrzyma szybką pauperyzację społeczeństwa. Ukraina potrzebuje też pilnej pomocy humanitarnej, bez której Ukraińcy nie przetrwają zimy. Chodzi o pomoc dla prawie 7 milionów uchodźców wewnętrznych, którzy nie mają gdzie mieszkać ani gdzie posłać dzieci do szkół. Potrzebne jest też wspólne wsparcie polityczne dla Ukrainy i jego utrzymanie tak, aby opinia publiczna w naszych krajach nie zapomniała o kwestii ukraińskiej, a tematu tego nie przejęły grupy skrajne, często podzielające poglądy Rosji. Mimo tego ponurego obrazu sytuacji Ukrainy nie ma jednak realistycznego scenariusza, w którym Rosja jest w stanie tę wojnę wygrać. Skutki agresji mogą się bowiem okazać katastrofalne także dla niej samej. Rosyjska inwazja doprowadziła do wielu ofiar, masowych przesiedleń, zniszczenia dziedzictwa kulturowego i odwróciła pozytywne tendencje gospodarcze w Ukrainie. Jeśli pozostawimy Ukrainę samą sobie, wpływ inwazji będzie odczuwalny przez pokolenia. Dlatego należy skupić się na perspektywach odbudowy tego kraju, który potrzebuje swoistego odpowiednika planu Marshalla. Dyskusje na temat kształtu programu już się rozpoczęły, czego przykładem jest lipcowa konferencja w Lugano. Potrzeby są duże, bo poza zniszczeniami wynikającymi z konwencjonalnych działań wojennych Rosja celowo niszczy infrastrukturę strategiczną, co można porównać do taktyki spalonej ziemi. Straty w infrastrukturze oceniane są już na ponad 115 miliardów dolarów i rosną z każdym rosyjskim atakiem rakietowym. O ile Bank Światowy ocenił koszty odbudowy na około 349 miliardów euro, biorąc pod uwagę stan zniszczeń z początku czerwca, to rząd ukraiński uważa, że na rekonstrukcję kraju potrzeba już 750 miliardów euro. Zebranie takich środków odpowiadających od 150 do 200% przedwojennego ukraińskiego PKB będzie dużym wyzwaniem dla Ukrainy, ale także dla wspólnoty międzynarodowej. Jest to jednak zadanie możliwe do wykonania dla wspólnoty międzynarodowej, jeżeli program będzie wiarygodny i będzie obejmował poza odbudową także reformy strukturalne, praworządność, ochronę inwestorów zagranicznych. Odbudowa Ukrainy powinna uwzględniać europejskie aspiracje jej obywateli i uwzględniać główne polityki Unii, zwłaszcza klimatyczną. Ważne, aby Ukraina po odbudowie była krajem o niskoemisyjnej gospodarce, odpornym na klęski żywiołowe oraz sprzyjającym wyłączeniu społecznemu. Istnieją koncepcje, według których sam program odbudowy mógłby być wzorowany na wdrożonym przez Unię po pandemii COVID Funduszu Odbudowy. W takim scenariuszu Ukraina przedstawiłaby swój własny krajowy plan odbudowy, którego kolejne elementy byłyby zatwierdzane przez darczyńców, a ich wdrażanie byłoby następnie monitorowane. Wprowadzenie takiego programu pomogłoby Ukrainie i byłoby okazją do zacieśnienia relacji gospodarczych z państwami członkowskimi Unii Europejskiej. Ważne jest również, aby w procesie odbudowy mogły wziąć udział przedsiębiorstwa tylko z tych państw, które jasno opowiedziały się w tej wojnie po stronie ładu międzynarodowego i integralności Ukrainy. Dziękuję bardzo.
Thank you, Mr. Kleina, for your insightful presentation. Now, dear colleagues, I would like to open the floor for the debate. We have approximately 40 members that have asked to intervene, and I would like, of course, to thank you in advance for your valuable comments. And I kindly ask you to limit your constructive interventions up to 2 minutes. 20 speakers will be on the first session, and then around 4:30 to 5 we'll have a coffee break, and then we recess after the coffee break for to listen to the rest of our colleagues. Now, the first speaker on my list is Mrs. Kravchuk from Ukraine. I would like to, excuse me please if I do not pronounce the names very clearly. I'm trying to do my best. Okay.
Yes, thank you, colleagues. I will, at the beginning, beg my pardon. I will take a bit more than 2 minutes because I made a very long journey to have this very short speech. But nevertheless, I'm thankful for our Polish colleagues to hosting this autumn session in Warsaw for OSCE PA. And today is the 24th. On the 24th of February, I woke up in Kiev because there were missiles coming into my city. And I went to my parliament a few hours later to vote and to do my job. Today, on the 24th of November of 2022, I woke up in Warsaw and I went to to Polish Sejm, and the first thing that I saw on Polish Sejm was Ukrainian flag. So I thank you, dziękuję, to our Polish friends for everything that you do for us. But right now, at the very same moment, millions of people are literally without electricity in Ukraine, without heat, without water, without connection. We're hardly in touch with our loved ones because when there's no electricity, the mobile operators do not work because they still need electricity to run their equipment. But does it change our attitude towards this war? No. And we will fight Russians if needed in darkness because we have light inside of us and we have dignity and we have freedom, what we are fighting for. And if you would ask any person, for example, in Kherson that are living right now without electricity and connection and heat for weeks, or if not months, do they want to live without electricity or without Russians? They will tell without Russians. And that every Ukrainian would answer you. But of course, I will come back to the topic, what your parliaments and governments can do. And I will probably put it in different way because I would like to read you a letter from a small boy. His name is Igor, and he wrote a letter to Saint Nicholas, to Santa Claus. So he said, "Dear Santa, this year I wanted to ask you to bring me a bicycle, but I'm not living at home right now, so maybe you will not able to find me. Thus, I'm asking for the superpower for armed forces of Ukraine. Bring them the 1000th level super armor so they all come home alive, super invisibility so the enemy could not see them, unlimited weapons and ammunition, and of course, a warm winter. This is all I want this year. Thank you. Glory to Ukraine from Igor." And that's what you can do. You can fulfill this letter. You can find weapons to be sent to Ukraine. You can find humanitarian aid.
Thank
you cannot
you,
bring
Mrs.
the.
Kravchuk.
Yes, I'm
Yes,
coming
you
to
have
the
to
end.
conclude, please, because we have 39 more speakers.
I understand, but it took me very long time to come
Yes, there
here.
are two more of your colleagues on the
Yes,
list,
yes,
so they can add on your comments.
Yes, so please, you can find some humanitarian aid, generators, tents for mobile heating to make this winter warmer, because winter is not coming, winter is here. Thank you so much.
Thank you, thank you. I have to tell you that in order to help you control the time, when the 2 minutes are off, then you hear the bell, so please wrap it up as soon as possible in order to give the chance to the rest of the people. Now, from Belgium, Mr. Demesmaeker. Thank you. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Yes, what can I add after this intervention of Yevgenia? Listen, when we were in Birmingham this summer, for our session, I took the floor and I warned that the winter would be very, very disastrous if the free world would not act immediately. We are half a year later and I'm upset because we did not do enough. A few weeks ago, I visited Lutsk and Rivne and Kiev again, and I saw the destruction caused by Caliber cruise missiles to the electric distribution stations, leaving communities without power, without water, without heating. And I have to confirm what Yevgenia just said. If you talk to the people, you know what they say? Yes, we're in the dark, we're in the cold, we have no water, but we have our freedom, we have our democracy, and we will defend it. Their endurance is an inspiration for the free world. While Putin is losing the war on the ground, he is terrorizing people. It is terror. And I particularly welcome the resolution of the European Parliament voted this week, labeling Russia as a sponsor of state terrorism. And as if they had to confirm this, a few hours later they again bombed critical infrastructure, maternity hospitals, killing newborn children. They are terrorists, and we have to act accordingly. When our states joined this institution, They agreed on the values and the principles that we share. And I heard this morning, we will not negotiate on these principles. Good. Then we have to ask ourselves, is there still a place for participating states who choose a completely other path, who abandon these principles and go another way? They put themselves outside this organization. There is no room for interpretation. Russia doesn't leave any room for interpretation. Now, when we get back to our own capitals, we have to be very clear, very straightforward, and very strong, and make sure that we all do our part and provide Ukraine with the means to defend their skies. It had to be done 9 months ago, to repair their critical infrastructure and to provide them with emergency aid. It's nice to stand with Ukraine. It's much better to act for Ukraine.
Thank you so much. I do feel very bad to interrupt each one of you, but unfortunately I have time to keep. Thank you for keeping the time. Now from Ukraine, our colleague from Ukraine, Mr. Rakhmadzili, please, the floor is yours.
Я намеренно буду говорить на русском языке, хотя я не пользуюсь этим языком с 24 февраля, потому что люди, которые убивают моих сограждан и моих друзей, говорят на этом языке. Но этот язык хорошо знают члены некоторых делегаций, тех самых делегаций, которые сомневаются, должна ли страна-агрессор нести ответственность. Я хочу, чтобы они услышали меня лучше и, возможно, лучше поняли. В названии нашей организации есть два ключевых слова – безопасность и сотрудничество. Имеет ли право принимать решение государства, которое наплевало на сотрудничество и растоптало ногами безопасность? Самое страшное, что может быть на войне, а я это видел, к сожалению, не единожды, это гибель детей. Моя семья находилась в оккупации в Бучанском районе и вырвалась с оккупированной территории, когда начала заканчиваться вода и еда, избегая главной дороги, которая вся была усеяна сожженными машинами и телами убитых людей, телами сожженных детей. Я видел эти тела, когда заезжал в апреле, когда российскую армию оттуда погнали. А теперь я обращаюсь к вам. Представьте себе, что это ваши дети. Представьте себе, что дети ваши вытаскивают вас из-под сгоревших обломков дома. Если после этого страна и ее представители, которые освещают эту убийственную войну, могут принимать решения о безопасности и сотрудничестве, это тест на состоятельность и жизнеспособность этой организации. Мы уподобляемся вегетарианцу, который кормит с руки людоеда. И все разговоры о том, что мы оставляем мостик для мира, я напомню, что все переговоры успешные с агрессором были только после того, как были успешные военные операции вооруженных сил Украины и совместное дипломатическое давление. И я очень рассчитываю на то, что мы будем ответственными и примем единственно возможное решение.
Thank you. Thank you. Now our colleague from Moldova, Mr. Kyriak, the floor is yours.
Dear Madam Vice President, ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues, Russia's war against Ukraine has already caused thousands of deaths, displaced millions of people, triggered unprecedented economic damage globally, and the greatest humanitarian crisis in Europe. Moldova is a state committed to peace and diplomatic solutions. We joined the international community in condemning Russia's war against Ukraine and called for the end of this brutal aggression against a friendly neighboring state. From the very beginning of the war, Moldova provides assistance to Ukraine, focusing its efforts on supporting a large number of Ukrainians who have found refuge in our country, as well as on rendering humanitarian aid. Today, Ukraine is fighting not only for its independence and territorial integrity, but also for regional security in an extended plan. On 15 November, Russia launched around 100 missiles on Ukraine, causing widespread damage to electricity infrastructure. We felt a direct impact as electricity supplies were cut off across large part of Moldova. Moldova also experienced massive blackouts yesterday. We expect that further blackouts could happen. Recent perpetration of Russia missiles endangered our security. I mean the events of October 10, when 3 Russian cruise missiles targeting Ukraine's energetic infrastructure flagrantly violate the airspace of the Republic of Moldova. I would like to thank our partners and friends who have already pledged their support to help us manage our multiple crises. Your available assistance is of vital importance for us. We stand in solidarity with the people in Ukraine in this difficult period. It is time to take of peace and put an end to this terrible war. Slava Ukraini!
Thank you, Mr. Kyriak. And now our colleague from Ukraine, Mr. Frolov.
Madam Chair, dear colleagues, there have already been almost 600 rocket attacks on our territory during the last 6 weeks. Millions of Ukrainians continue to be without electricity, water, heating, and communications. More than 24 hours, I can't get any reply from my son from Kiev and from my mother from Kryvyi Rih city. There is reality of almost every day in Ukraine. There is no precedence for a complete blackout whole country due to a military attack. However, in cold winter temperatures, the planned destruction of energy infrastructure is equivalent to the use of weapons of mass destruction and a crime against humanity. In the same time, we hear regularly the calls to ceasefire and start of peace negotiations. Our position is clear. Russian occupier troops must leave the sovereign territory of Ukraine. Afterwards, we will talk on compensation for the losses brought by Russia, bringing all those responsible to account, discussing disarmament, nuclear disarmament of Russia. The action of Putin's regime in Ukraine withdraw all its representatives from the category of adversary or enemy of the civilized world, with whom it is possible to negotiate. Now they are war criminals, terrorists who kill hostages, civilians, children, women, and the elderly for any cases. We have continued to make strong political statements at the OSCE PA formats for long 9 months, trying to persuade Russia to stop violating international law. In response, we get missile attacks and nuclear blackmail, more war crimes, food crisis, energy crisis, refugee crisis, which lead to a decrease in trust in all the influences of international organizations that cannot stop terror. Therefore, today, the Ukrainian delegation could ask all 57 members of OSCE for the disconnection of all Russian embassies and consulates from electricity, the internet, and water and heat supply. But of course, we won't do that. However, we need more practical steps to protecting the core principles of the Helsinki Final Act, to the approaching victory of Ukraine and the approval of changes to the rules of procedure of the Assembly, which will allow suspension of the mandate of the delegation of a participating state, as President Zelensky called PA. Thank you.
Thank you. And now our colleague from Armenia, Mr. Eduard Akachanian.
Thank you. Dear colleagues, having no intention to undermine the grave repercussions that the war in Ukraine has had on the OSCE region, I'd like to draw your attention to a different area of this organization. As you know, starting from May 12, 2021, Azerbaijan has started a process of a crawling invasion of the sovereign territory of the Republic of Armenia. Since then, there have been 3 major military attacks by Azerbaijan, the latest being in mid-September this year, as a result of which their troops have occupied about 180 square kilometers of the sovereign territory of Armenia. A fact which was oddly admitted by the president of Azerbaijan himself during one of his latest public speeches, saying literally the following: "Now the Armenian people know what occupation and loss mean." The international community has also been largely firm and united in its assessment, reaffirming that Azerbaijani troops have indeed invaded the sovereign territory of Armenia and should relocate to their pre-May 12 positions. So what are Azerbaijan's justifications of such blatant acts? First, these actions were a result of imaginary military provocations of Armenia, and second, since there is no delimited border between Armenia and Azerbaijan, then there is no basis to accuse one of intrusion, practically implying that there is no existing border between the two countries. Apart from the fact that Armenia is a democratic state and democracies don't tend to attack their neighbors, I'd like to draw your attention to the purely practical aspect of these baseless accusations. From 2010 to 2021 included, the average military budget of Azerbaijan has been 6-fold that of Armenia. So what our colleagues from Azerbaijan are expecting you to believe is that an army at least 6 times smaller than theirs is continuously engaging in military provocations. This is insulting to logic and intelligence. The argument of the absence of a delimited border is even more absurd and overall a very dangerous narrative. Because if there is no border between the two countries, the principle of territorial integrity, which has been the cornerstone of Azerbaijani diplomacy in the context of Nagorno-Karabakh conflict, becomes completely pointless. Because if there is no border, then there is no identified territory. If there is no territory, then the integrity of what have you been talking about throughout the last 30 years? Dear colleagues, I would have preferred to use this platform to engage in constructive dialogue with the delegation from Azerbaijan, but unfortunately, they still do not genuinely share our peace agenda. Therefore, we will make sure that our international colleagues from the OSCE are duly informed about the actual situation in South Caucasus, expecting an adequate reaction to the blatant acts of aggression by Azerbaijan. Thank you.
Thank you. And now our colleague from Hungary, Mrs. Zabo.
Thank you. Dear fellow delegates, we're all here because Russia's brutal war on Ukraine has made us realize how fragile our peace and security are in Europe. As a member of the Hungarian Democratic Opposition, I must also speak up for this peace and security and freedom in Europe. We all know that a community is, like the EU or the OSCE, is only as strong as its weakest member. We have all created these international communities and organizations because we all share the same values. We believe in basic human rights, civil liberties, and solidarities. And a tragedy like Russia's war on Ukraine can show us how these members live up to these common values. Unfortunately, there are governments that have betrayed these values and our common rules. There are governments that rather choose the friendship of Russia instead of fully standing up for a sovereign and independent country like Ukraine that has been attacked. Unfortunately, there are governments, such as my country's, as the only EU government has not ratified Sweden's and Finland's NATO membership application in a time of crisis. There are governments whose European parliamentary members didn't press the button yesterday when the European Parliament declared Russia a state sponsor of terrorism. There are governments that, with no limit, spreads pure Russian propaganda. These governments act against our peace and security in Europe. These governments betray our common values. But these illiberal states and these Russian friendships are not formed overnight. It takes years and years to develop them. So if we as a community, as the OSCE, just sit back and wait and do nothing for years and years and decades, this is exactly what happens. If we don't stand up together and take swift and drastic measures, such as abolish, for example, in the EU, a single veto right, or keep allowing the Russian spy bank, the so-called International Investment Bank, to operate freely in Europe, then the Europe we know will not exist soon for our children. Our dear fellow delegates, we cannot allow any country to be the Trojan horse for Russia. We must stand up together and act together. Otherwise, the peaceful and secure Europe as we know it now will not exist for our children. Thank you.
Thank you. And now Dr. Hedy Fry, Special Representative for Gender from Canada. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I wanted to thank Poland for coming up and filling in the gap to allow us to hold this meeting here. And I also want to thank them for taking the enormous number of refugees that they've taken and integrating them into their country. I also want to say that Canada stands in solidarity with Ukraine completely. We have supported Ukraine economically, training their forces, and with arms, and will continue to do so in perpetuity if necessary. But I'm hoping that we won't have to do things in perpetuity. The OSCE was created to maintain peace and security in this region. We are based on clear principles. The Helsinki Final Act relays those principles. The principles are respect for territorial integrity, rule of law, human rights, and fundamental freedoms, to refrain from threat of force against another member state. One member has violated every single one of those principles. Not just one, not two, but every single one of those principles was violated by one member state. The statement by a very well-known statesman that the only thing necessary for evil to triumph in this world is for good men to do nothing. Now, I'd like to add good people instead of good men, but there we go. If we do nothing, we allow evil to thrive. We have seen evil, and we need to do something about it. We cannot pussyfoot around anymore, people. We cannot sit here and say, let's do, let's when, let's how. And so I want to say that this is really important, that we stand firmly and say if a member violates all of the rules, that member should be temporarily suspended until they agree to stop violating those rules. And this is Canada's position. This is what I want to see here today. Thank you.
You had more time anyway, Mrs. Fry.
Oh,
you had time.
Do not, Madam Chair, do not let a politician say that they have more time. We will continue forever. But I would like to just quickly point out, though, that in terms of...
Please go ahead.
I would like to say that let us remember 1325. The people who are fundamentally victims of this illegal war are women. And we need to be able to look at how we get women involved in peace, security, and negotiations. I might add that the particular Russian Federation always did not support this. We need to support it. We only have about 6% of women in negotiating right now, and 6% of women in building new economies. And let us make sure that we get women involved in peace and security. Thank you.
You see, I was absolutely right to give you more time, because I expected you to say what you have said. And now our colleague from Azerbaijan, Mr. Azai Giliev, head of the second committee. Please, Mr. Giliev, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I will talk and address the distinguished assembly as the head of Azerbaijan delegation. Dear colleagues, unfortunately, we have witnessed yet another provocative statement being made by Armenian delegation. But I am compelled to make some clarification and to respond to these reckless and groundless accusations. First of all, I would say that Azerbaijan has never attacked on any country, including Armenia. And it is untrue accusation and a fabricated propaganda made by Armenian delegation, and they're trying to spread around the world. And it is not the work, and it doesn't bring any benefit to Armenian delegation. I would say that it should be stopped. As a matter of fact, I would say that Azerbaijan is not interested and cannot be interested in the military tension on the border, on the delimited border, because as a matter of fact, I would say that the military operations just was very close proximity to the area that Azerbaijan has started large scale of the, let's say, projects for reconstruction and rebuilding these liberated territories. On the other hand, it is really unfortunate that the Armenian delegation tries to accuse Azerbaijan on aggression. It is really I would say, the political hypocrisy. It is political hypocrisy of a country that has occupied the territory of Azerbaijan for 30 years, committed the war crimes, crimes against humanity. How this country can be there to accuse Azerbaijan or other countries for the same that this country violated for 3 decades. Dear colleagues, I would say that still Armenia occupies 8 Azerbaijani villages, as well as didn't withdraw. It is a remnant of military forces from the area that Russian peacekeepers have been temporarily deployed. On contrary, now Armenia, with the help of this peacekeeper, now transfer the weapons, illegally use this Russian, let's say, road for the name of having another confrontation. I would say that, Madam Chair and the dear colleagues, it is the right time for Armenia to think very carefully about the constructive approach, because this region needs a peace and reconciliation. But Armenia delegation doesn't show any sign for normalization, for putting their effort to normalize the relationship between Armenia and Azerbaijan. I would say that, dear colleagues, I'm confident that if the competent international institutions, including the OSCE, would have been taking necessary decisions or steps when Armenia started to occupy the territory of Azerbaijan, I do believe that this current scenario, a tragic event, wouldn't be happening in other OSCE countries, including Ukraine. On the last point, Madam Chair, I would like to express the position of my country that Azerbaijan fully and unambiguously support the territorial integrity, sovereignty, and inviolability of the internationally recognized borders of Ukraine. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And now, Mrs. Grigoriali from Armenia.
Thank you, Ms. Haralambidis. Dear colleagues, the reality we face nowadays is not only complicated, it is scary. And each of our countries has numerous challenges to fight. The ongoing war in Ukraine has resulted in the crisis of European security, leaving us with little room to focus on other conflicts. However, this approach has proven itself wrong, as the crises have the tendency not just to escalate, but also to spread. 2 years ago, the lack of decisive and adequate reaction to the 44 days war unleashed by Azerbaijan against the people of Nagorno-Karabakh made another precedent of solving issues with the use of force and making the world bear its consequences. If one authoritarian state can unleash aggression, commit war crimes, and stay unpunished, why wouldn't any other authoritarian country think that they can also try and succeed? But today, instead of getting back to the mere accusations of colleagues from Azerbaijan, which is their usual strategy, I want to talk about our response, what we need to do. Unlike many actors of the international community and heads of states who conveyed a strong message to Azerbaijan that aggression cannot be tolerated, shamefully, our Parliamentary Assembly has failed to address targeted and specified statements regarding the situation. Our response to aggression needs to be very concrete. Democracies should support democracies. Failure of supporting a democracy attacked by an authoritarian country is a direct harm and a huge damage to democracy, leaving it alone against the dangerous idea of that democracies cannot protect themselves and security is better ensured by non-democratic means, by a strong hand. The consequences of this risk realized should not be underestimated, not only in regards to Armenia or the Caucasus region, but the larger region of the OSCE. On a more practical note, the OSCE had deployed the needs assessment mission to Armenia after the attack of Azerbaijan made on September 13 and 14. We believe that the availability of the OSCE needs assessment mission's report to all participating states will be essential in ensuring OSCE's further engagement in our region and play a key role in preventing new possible aggression and establishing finally sustainable, real sustainable peace in the South Caucasus. Thank you.
Thank you. And now, Mrs. Michaud from Canada.
Merci, Madame la Présidente. Je suis députée du Québec au Parlement canadien et c'est un honneur pour moi d'être parmi vous à nouveau. Je vais d'abord réitérer que que la déclaration de Birmingham que nous avons adoptée en juillet dernier énonce clairement que la guerre d'agression menée par la Russie contre l'Ukraine viole le droit international, en plus d'être un affront aux valeurs et principes de l'OSCE. Depuis le début de la guerre, la Russie a aveuglément eu recours à des opérations militaires classiques. En parallèle, elle a aussi poursuivi des tentatives de déstabilisation de l'Ukraine au moyen d'actions hybrides et cybernétiques malveillantes. Bien qu'elles ne représentent qu'une facette de la guerre, les méthodes de guerre non conventionnelles ne peuvent être ignorées. Les nombreuses actions cybernétiques malveillantes de la Russie passent par le vol de données et la désinformation à des cyberattaques faisant obstruction à la distribution de biens essentiels comme les médicaments, les denrées alimentaires et les fournitures de secours. Ces tactiques sont souvent teintées d'ambiguïté en mélangeant l'utilisation d'outils militaires et non militaires pour atteindre des objectifs stratégiques. Ces actions ont toutefois des conséquences tangibles et demandent une réponse adéquate de notre part. Vous savez probablement que pas plus tard qu'hier, le site du Parlement européen a été ciblé par une cyberattaque tout juste après que les députés aient adopté une résolution très ferme déclarant que la Russie est un État soutenant le terrorisme. En tant que membre de l'OSCE, nous avons le devoir de dénoncer ce genre d'attaque. Alors que notre région est confrontée à cette nouvelle réalité caractérisée par un environnement sécuritaire de plus en plus complexe, nous devons moderniser nos approches. L'OTAN a d'ailleurs récemment reconnu que certaines activités cyber et hybrides malveillantes pourraient, dans certaines circonstances, conduire à l'invocation de l'article 5 du traité de l'Atlantique Nord. Ce type de reconnaissance est essentiel et nous devons également honorer nos engagements d'augmenter notre résilience à ces tactiques au niveau national. Le Canada a pris un certain nombre de mesures pour soutenir la cyber-résilience de l'Ukraine et travaille à améliorer la sienne. Le Comité permanent de la sécurité publique et nationale de la Chambre des communes, que j'ai la chance de vice-présider, publiera prochainement un rapport et des recommandations pour que le gouvernement canadien puisse prendre des positions quant à sa posture de sécurité par rapport à la Russie. Le Canada continue également de communiquer de l'information sur les cybermenaces à l'Ukraine et investit dans la lutte contre des campagnes de désinformation liées à la guerre en Ukraine qui sont parrainées par la Russie. Madame la Présidente, merci.
Thank you. And now Mrs. Pia Kauma.
Madam Chair, dear colleagues, maintaining peace based on the Helsinki principles is founded on trust between all the parties. Even in the most difficult of times, the OSCE has been able to continue the road of dialogue to avoid full-blown conflict. Russia's unprovoked attack against Ukraine this February changed this setup for good. How can we continue to promote our values and dialogue when weapons are talking? Is it even possible to have a dialogue with a partner whose words we cannot trust? Tomorrow, the Standing Committee is faced with a proposal to change our rules for us to have the right to suspend from the Parliamentary Assembly a participating state that seriously breaches our common values. On the one hand, we must consider, of course, the suffering of the people of Ukraine caused by Russia. Therefore, we might choose to exclude and isolate Russia. But on the other hand, excluding Russia would mean that we would exclude them from yet another international forum that at least forces Russians to listen. Both the alternatives have their pros and cons. The aim of the OSCE was never to discuss security issues among like-minded countries, but to find a balance between power politics and jointly agreed principles for a peaceful coexistence in the region. Dear Madam Chair, if we suspend Russia from the parliamentary work of the OSCE, I feel in a way that we also give up on our aim towards dialogue. Russian delegation is not here today, and they were not in Birmingham, which means that we already have the means to keep them away from the PA's work if we like. Dear colleagues, the decision is very difficult because it is also a question about values. Whichever decision we take, this decision will be reflected in the OSCE as a whole. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Costel from Romania, our dearest colleague, please. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Ms. Chair Irene Karalambides. Dear friends, please allow me to reiterate Romania's firm support for Ukraine's independence, sovereignty, and territorial integrity. Russia's aggression against Ukraine is the most serious assault on the European and the Euro-Atlantic security since World War II. The attack against Ukraine is an attack against the international order based on rules and against its values and principles. Romania responded in solidarity and unity along with its like-minded partners. Defending the rules-based international orders requires responses and swift actions. In this context, the importance of international sanctions against Russia cannot be underestimated. The packages of sanctions are essential tools in ensuring that the Russian war machine does not receive further financing. We have to think beyond our generation to the next generations because this war might determine the world they will live in. In this context, parliamentary diplomacy is an important and valuable tool. Therefore, I welcome the organization of the first parliamentary summit of the Crimea platform that was attended also by members of our parliamentary assembly. I would like to emphasize the message sent by the representative of the Romanian Chamber of Deputies on this summit. Romania will continue to support Ukraine and its initiatives in multilateral formats. Furthermore, Romania will contribute to the reconstruction of Ukraine. We are currently analyzing the best ways to participate in the reconstruction process of Ukraine, and we are assessing the options for mobilizing financial resources following the discussions on the reconstruction that took place in Lugano in July and in Berlin in October. Thank you.
Thank you. And now, dearest colleagues, we are going to have a break for 30 minutes. We will be back 5 o'clock sharp because we still have many speakers and we are very interested in hearing what they have to say. So please keep the time, 30 minutes break, 5 o'clock sharp, be back. Thank you. Even if Marco says no, I will put your name on. Because I love Slovakians, I was there in Bratislava.
Okay, good. Thank you. But just to be sure that we pronounce the name properly.
No, actually, the reason I was in Slovakia, Bratislava, it was because of your final beneficiary law, shell companies, etc. And I came here there for the conference.